everyone, welcome back to Simming History, where we look at the history of architecture through the lens of the Sims. And today on Simming History, we're going to look at the Bahay Kubo, a vernacular architecture of the indigenous peoples of the Philippines, and quite possibly the foundation of the modern city. So, quick refresher before we get started, vernacular architecture is an architectural type that reflects a local culture, climate, and building materials. And when I say this is an indigenous vernacular architecture type, I mean that this is pre-Spanish colonization of the Philippines. So we don't even know for certain how old this type is. It's been around for a good long time. And like most indigenous architecture types, it is in itself an engineering marvel. It brilliantly handles the local climate. It can withstand their unique weather conditions, typhoons, which for those who don't live in the South Pacific, it's a hurricane. And it's eco-friendly. And it's eco-friendly because it uses all natural and local building materials. In this case, primarily coconut palms, Nipa palms, and bamboo. The Bahay Kubo can be separated into basically 3 levels. The first level is an open space below the main living area, and that open space is created using stilts or columns that are sunk down into the sand and dirt. This elevated space allows for the floodwaters during the typhoon season, but also allows for better airflow. And you're going to see that as a very common theme with this building. It's all about the airflow. Traditionally, these stilts or columns were made out of bamboo poles or sometimes palm. These days, you're more likely to see it made out of concrete with rebar, and with exposed rebar coming out of the top, which they then wrap around the roof structure to try to help hold it on during the high winds of the typhoon season. The second level of the Bahay Kubo is the level people live in. And it's the level of the floor. The floor is made up of bamboo or palm beams, and the flooring itself is frequently just bamboo strips. That is not airtight, and it's meant to allow some of that airflow from that space below. And then the third level is the roof. The roof is super steep with really long eaves. The steepness provides a space inside the Bahay Kubo for warm air to rise, which again allows for good airflow. The steepness also allows for really great water shedding. The long eaves provide really great shade from the sun, which we'll get to when we talk about the windows. The structure of the roof primarily is bamboo, but also with some use of palm timbers around the top plate, which is the beam that runs along the top of the wall. It connects all of the columns, and then the roof rafters sit on that top plate. And then it's shingled in something called Nipa shingles, which are the palm fronds of the Nipa palm, which is a low-growing palm. And the Nipa palms are bent over a bamboo rod and then tied in place with twine made from frequently bamboo fibers. Now, these shingles are about 2 feet wide or so, and they last for about 3.5 years. And although that may not sound very long to us, we're used to, say, asphalt shingles that have a lifespan of about 20-25 years. Because of the cheapness of material and the ease of construction, it's actually cheaper over the lifespan to re-shingle this house every 3.5 years than it would be to shingle it in asphalt shingles every 25. And it's far better for the environment. Asphalt shingles leach all sorts of chemicals. This is literally just palm fronds. To keep the palm fronds from blowing off in typhoons, they make a grid of bamboo, and they place that grid over the Nipa shingles and tie it down to the roof structure. Now, the walls in the Bahay Kubo are not structural, so they are not load-bearing. They don't carry any weight. So they can literally be anything, and most frequently they're either something called tad-tad, which is unrolled bamboo, where bamboo is scored so that they can unroll it and lay it flat, or it's a woven panel made from bamboo, sometimes with patterns woven into it. And just like with the roof and with the floor, None of this is entirely airtight, and it's all meant to allow airflow. Windows in the Bahay Kubo are really just openings. They have no glass. They do have shutters for nighttime. The shutters sometimes slide close or they're propped open with a stick, and Sims actually made fairly accurate windows for this architecture type for their island living expansion to an extent that I'm actually quite surprised. They went into such great detail, they actually rendered the sticks that prop the shutters open accurately. And I was floored when I saw that. Now the windows are fairly high in the wall in the Bahay Kubo, and that's to keep it under the shade of that deep eave that we talked about earlier, and that's so that no direct sunlight comes into the home. You can get indirect lighting, which still lights up your home, but without all of that heat that is gained from direct sunlight. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how on earth does this relate to the modern city? And that's a great question. Well, the structure I just described is something that's called a skeleton frame. None of the walls are load-bearing. Everything is carried by just these columns that are set down in the ground. And that brings us to a man named William LeBaron Jenney. William LeBaron Jenney was an engineer from Chicago in the late 1800s, but earlier in his life he was a bit of a wandering soul. He participated in the California Gold Rush and wandered his way into the South Pacific, visiting the Philippines, which I'm sure is just a coincidence, right? Eventually, he went to engineering school and even served as an engineer in the Union Army during the American Civil War before settling in Chicago. Now, Chicago in the late 1800s was dealing with a lot of problems. Not dissimilar to a lot of problems they still deal with. It's crowded. There's not enough space. They can't build north, south, or west because of other built-up sprawl, and they can't build east because of a lake. So what do? The immediate answer for many other cities was just build taller. Cities like New York, for example, but New York City is built on bedrock. Chicago is built on something they call the Chicago Swamp, which is layers of blue clay with intermittent layers of sand. Blue clay is this super silty clay that's full of a lot of organics. And blue clay and sand are not good substrates. They don't have good bearing capacity. So how do you build up? Specifically, during a time when all construction was load-bearing. And by that I mean all walls were load-bearing. Your building was carried by the walls. So the taller your building was, the thicker your base became. So your first floor walls could end up several feet thick just to carry the weight of the building above. And after a certain point, that's not economical. It simply costs too much to make those walls so thick. And of course, there's the very likely possibility that the building will sink. And there have been a couple buildings that have sunk in Chicago's history. So, what do? Well, William LeBaron Jenney found himself one day with a lot of time on his hands. A workers' strike had shut down all construction, and so he was just pretty much sitting around with nothing to do but think. And he remembered that time in the Philippines, and he remembered those bamboo Bahay Kubos just made of bamboo and rope that could withstand typhoons. And he realized we could build a skeletal system. That's what the Bahay Kubo is. It's a skeletal system. The walls have absolutely zero weight bearing. You could remove the walls and that building will keep standing. So he set about designing a building that could do that. And he designed the Home Insurance Building, which was built in the 1880s in Chicago. And it's considered the first skyscraper because it's the first building whose entire structure was steel and iron, and it was all skeleton frame. so its exterior walls played absolutely zero role in carrying the weight of the building. This was huge, and it changed construction as the world knew it. Suddenly, pretty much anything was possible, and over time, it proved that anything was possible. The skeletal frame has a lot of plus sides. It's significantly lighter, so in Chicago it means it's not going to sink as much in the muck. You don't need to put in as big of a footing for it. And because the exterior walls weren't load-bearing, they literally could be anything. They could be all glass. So as you're walking through today's modern cities and you're seeing all these beautiful glass skyscrapers, that is only possible because of Jenny's skeletal system. And that in turn was only possible because of the indigenous people of the Philippines. Which brings us finally to the core point of this episode. So many times cultures can be dismissed as primitive, and early architecture is not important. But these cultures and their buildings served as the foundations for every building that came after. And without them, our world would not be as we know it. And we would very literally be sinking in the Chicago swamp. There would be no Empire State Building, no Willis or Sears Tower, and no Burj Khalifa. Yet, these indigenous cultures never get the credit that they deserve for developing these systems that we still use today. And it's not just the indigenous Philippines. It's all over the world. They weren't primitive, and they aren't primitive. And we could learn something from how they live with the land rather than just on it. So thanks for joining me this week for this very special episode of Simming History. Let me know in the comment section down below if you have any questions, or if you could see yourself maybe living on a beach in a Bahay Kubo. I know I could, primarily right now. You can find me on the Sims 4 gallery, where there will be a playable version of this build, and on Instagram, where I post teasers for videos when I remember to do so. I'll see you in 2 weeks for a very special spooky episode for Halloween. Until then, we're trying to figure out who killed him and with what. Bye.